Scripting for the Web, WS300, Platt College. Arrays and other objects. An array is a single variable that holds multiple values. This depth is why it is considered an object and not primitive data. Arrays in JavaScript are zero-based indexed arrays. That means that the first item is always 0. It does not support arrays with named indexes called keys. In order to have key-value pairs, you need to use JSON. We can get or set the items inside of an array by utilizing its indice. The old method of instantiating an array with the keyword new is not recommended. Use the empty brackets method instead. JavaScript arrays are dynamic, and you can insert an item at whatever index you want. Array properties. There are 3. Constructor, length, and prototype. It's the same set as strings. I put length here because it is the property that concerns us the most. It is important to note that the highest index of an array is always one less than its length. Array methods. There are a huge number of methods to work with arrays. Even more now when we add in the higher order functions like map and filter with ES6 and 7. Here are a few of the more common ones that are used. ToString takes all the values of an array and makes a comma-separated list. Value of does the same. Join is really cool since it allows you to replace the comma-separated list with whatever character you want in the argument. So instead of a comma, you could have an asterisk, as the example here shows. Pop removes the last item in the array. Push adds one to the end. Shift and unshift do the same, only at the start of the array. I remember shift and unshift being at the start because it shifts all the indices of the items in the array. Date object. Date is just one of the many object types we will be using in class, and it is a useful object to know. Days and months are in 0 index format, so Sunday is 0 and so is January. Hours are also in a 0 to 23 indexed array, like military time. 0 is midnight, 1 is 1 a.m., and 17 is 5 p.m. You can call the date object with no argument and it will give you the current time of the computer that you are using. When you give the date object a set of arguments, you are setting a date and a time for it. The arguments are from the largest unit to the smallest, from the year to the milliseconds. It does need to have the keyword new in order for it to be instantiated as a new date object to work. The date object has only 2 properties, and those are constructor and prototype. Date object methods. There are a number of things that we can do with dates and times. Here are a list of some of the methods to get values from a date object. All the things you do to access the date and its information are getters and setters. These are methods to get the information or to set the information. The best way to compare dates is with a method called getTime. This returns the total number of milliseconds since January 1st, 1970. This is called epoch date and is the date when time started for Unix computers. That timestamp is marked as 0. It's an easier comparison for number to number rather than month, year, day, etc. Objects. As I mentioned before, objects are complex variables. They have properties and methods. In HTML, browsers convert elements into objects and store them in memory. There's a model of it in your browser's memory, which we refer to as the Document Object Model, or the DOM, which it then renders. We can make updates to the page via the DOM with JavaScript, manipulate current elements, make new elements, and delete elements. The DOM is an API for CSS and JavaScript to utilize and gain access to the elements in the HTML document. You've been using this application programming interface this whole time, and I bet you didn't even know it. So here's an object in HTML. I love coffee and I love purple, so here's an image of a purple mug. Here you can see the properties that have been set for it: source, height, and width. Technically, those are called attributes. I like to think of attributes as properties we can see directly on the object. There are hidden properties for this item, like its current position on the page, any CSS declarations that would affect it. We can access those items through a method called getComputedStyle. All of these properties can be accessed and updated through JavaScript. Here are some examples of built-in JavaScript objects with methods attached to them. Array.sort will sort a list in alphabetical order. Date.getHours gets the hours of a date in 0 to 23 format. Math.random will get a random number and value from 0 to 1. This format is known as dot syntax. Objects don't have to be physical things. A bank account is something that is less and less a physical thing, but still very seriously real. I like to think of objects as nouns. If you can put the word "the" in front of whatever it is likely an object. Properties and attributes are ways of describing that object. A behavior or a method is similar to a verb. They do things. Remember our date function? GetHours returned what hour it was in our date object. So let's think about a bank account a moment. What properties might belong to a bank account? Account number, customer ID, balance, type, for example, checking, savings, high yield interest, etc. What methods might belong to a bank account? Deposit, apply interest, withdrawal, transfer, pay bill. Functions. There's a few different ways to write functions, two of which are most commonly seen. First is the declarative function. This format is the easiest to understand. A function is the same as a procedure or a subroutine in other programming languages. Functions usually have names, so they can be called, and the same code can be reused over and over again. It doesn't make sense to write the same bunch of code. In fact, if you ever find yourself writing a bunch of code that is nearly the same, you should consider how you can utilize a function to do your heavy lifting instead. You can pass parameters to a function that allows for the code to be executed to produce different results based off of different input. Different input yielding different results, even with the same set of instructions. For example, 2 plus 5 equals 7. Versus 3 plus 6 equals 9. Same instruction, add these two numbers together, different result, returned based off of different input. A function's code executes only when it is called or invoked. From JavaScript code, this can be triggered by an event or a timer or called by another function. They can also be self-invoked. There's a special syntax for that. And later in the course, we'll cover arrow functions, which are a more concise shorthand way of writing a function. If a function has a parameter specified, then when the function is called, it will expect that number of arguments. Fortunately, now we can write default values and not have to worry about all of the arguments. They will still need to be in order. Here is an example of a very useful function. This function returns a randomly generated number between a minimum and maximum number passed to the function. The example above would get a randomly generated number between 1 and 100. Anytime you wanted to get a random number, you could call upon this function instead of writing the whole math line each time you wanted a new random number. This concept of reusing code is called DRY. It stands for Don't Repeat Yourself. If you find yourself writing a bit of code over and over again, consider throwing it into a function. The keyword return. Return is an important concept. It was seen on the previous slide in the getRandomInt function. The previous example used the keyword return. Lots of keywords and built-in functions in JavaScript. The return within a function is one way to use DRY to get a new value each time the function is called. The value of myRandPerk calls the function getRandomInt, seen on the previous slide, and sets its actual value, which can be any full number between 1 and 100. I like to think of return as a question asked and answer given. So in essence, we are saying, hey JavaScript, give these two numbers to the function getRandomInt and have it give me a number between those two. It comes back with a value of 73. That number gets stored in the myRandPerk variable. In summary, JavaScript is an extensive language that has been around almost as long as the internet itself. It was built to specifically work inside browsers to make experiences on the web rich, useful, and entertaining.